All right, guys, welcome back to Within Tolerance. This is episode 8, and this is our first episode with a special guest. And Dylan and I are both extremely excited, and I know a lot of you guys are to have him on. We have Dan Rudolph. And Dylan, would you like to introduce him?
You guys, I feel like a lot of our audience will already know Dan. He's kind of the king of small parts and small shop automation. And Dan, if you could just give us maybe a little rundown on what you do at your shop. You know, for anybody who doesn't follow you on Instagram, just kind of what you do and what you post there, and what kind of attracted everybody to your page.
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys. Like I said, my name's Dan Rudolph. My company's called Rudolph LLC. We specialize in micro and medical machining, primarily using Swiss type lathes and a little. We have a couple mills as well. I started about 10 years ago in machining. Me and my dad started the business. We kind of just started with one machine and slowly grew from there. And we've been just two guys in a garage for about 10 or 9.5 years. And then most recently, my wife joined us to help my dad as he kind of gets up to retirement age.
That's awesome. That's a really cool. I mean, I feel like a lot of people see you as kind of like the ideal family, small business. I'm definitely one of them. Like, it seems great that you can work with your family and run a very successful business.
Yeah, it just worked out kind of perfectly. Me and my dad always got along, and not to say we don't have disagreements from time to time, but we kind of keep the work stuff, and we just work well together, solving problems. He's got a lot of manufacturing experience, and I graduated in 2007 with an industrial engineering degree from Penn State. So we kind of combine experience and classroom knowledge and approach things kind of in that direction.
That's great. So what steered you guys to start buying Swiss machines? I mean, I know it's a very specialized machine, specialized parts. I've talked to a few other people who run wire EDMs, and I kind of lump all of those machines, I guess, in the same kind of very boutique, but also you can't get certain parts without them, like under no circumstances. So
yeah, it's interesting. You see guys say like Swiss machines and wire EDM and 5-axis, and it's like those are the ones you need to be raised and trained on for many years to know what you're doing. It's like, yeah, but I'm scared of EDM and 5-axis, and the 5-axis guys look at me and don't know what I'm doing. It's just kind of funny. But yeah, my dad, like I said, my dad had a lot of experience, and he was a supervisor of a Swiss department. So he was around that kind of equipment and knew what it took to run. His department, I think, had 80, 90 machines when he retired.
Oh, wow.
So the thought was the place he worked for bought a lot of outside equipment as well, or outside machine parts. He kind of offered, if I retire and start something, could we be a vendor to you? And after a year or two of kind of getting our feet under us, they finally came on board and are our customer now.
Oh, that's great.
So that's kind of the beginning as far as how we started. Not to say that wasn't fairly difficult going that route. I mean, they are incredibly demanding, really zero tolerance for any errors or mistakes or anything. So it's kind of like trial by fire in that way. But that set us up to really do some interesting products and stuff for other customers that we developed the skills from our first customer from them.
So what's like your largest part, I guess, that you would make? I don't know what size bars your Swiss can take.
So yeah, we have an 820 which goes up to 20 millimeters, and I don't actually have a 20 millimeter collet for it or a guide bushing. I run 3/4 is the biggest I run in the shop.
Okay,
and that's not really common. 5/8 I run a lot of. About that machine's running 5/8 about half the month. And then the other half of the month, it's running 3/8 diameter.
wow, okay.
And then I have two L12s, which are 12 millimeter machines. And they're usually running 1/4 inch or 5/16 bar stock. And then I have two RO4s, which are 4 millimeter Citizens that run generally 1/8 inch most of the time. And then I have a couple jobs where I'll run hypodermic tubing in them. So it's like 35 thousandths. So that's fun.
Yeah, I saw that was on your website that you guys have a kind of a specialized process for hypodermic turning, or at least you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of early on, once we had those machines, we happened to get some jobs where tubing was you start with tubing as the raw material. That way, you don't have to drill a hole through it. And it's like, I wonder if we kind of market ourselves that way. If anyone's specifically looking for stuff made from tubing, and I've found a couple customers, but it's kind of more of a marketing thing. But we do a lot of tubing, even though it's from a couple customers that I had contact with prior to that advertising.
So, would you say that you're a majority medical parts, or is it kind of a wide mix, or how?
Yeah, no, we're probably 99% medical.
Oh wow, okay,
Yeah.
that's intense.
So, Dan, I got a question for you.
Sure.
So, out of the parts that you do, it sounds like you have a very small customer base that just keep coming back to you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say it's small. It's not as small as it was. We've grown in number of customers. We've probably tripled in the last 3 years or
Wow.
so. But we're very 80-20 rule, if you will, with our customers. I mean, 20% of them are 80% of our work. So.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of repeat work, blanket orders. I get a normal PO from our main customer is maybe 6 months worth of work
Wow.
in 1 month releases.
So, for those that aren't familiar with Swiss machining that might be listening, so if you're willing to share this, for example, what is like a count, a part count on one of your POs? Is it 10,000 parts? Is it 50 parts?
It does vary. Generally, the smaller the part, for whatever reason, you get orders for more of them. I have a PO that I'm working on. It's for 100,000 parts,
Wow.
which is unusual, but I was happy to get
Yeah.
it, although they're in a rush, which is annoying. But generally, maybe 5,000 to 20,000 would be kind of a normal PO, where you might have 10,000 a month of this, or 1,000 a month of this, or something like that, depending on complexity.
Okay. And so, I guess a question that got sparked up is, how do you count those?
I guess, I mean, we have two different weighing scales. So the parts that are kind of conducive to weight counting, we weigh count them. All that little really tiny stuff you see, like fingertip shots on Instagram, that's all counted on A and D scale. It's like 200 gram max. And I don't think we have a part that it can't count. It's really impressive.
Wow.
So that also kind of gets into, I'm a big quality nerd because that's
Mhm.
what I started in at my day job, and I program our auto CMMs and do a lot of that stuff. So how do you set your acceptance rate and like your sampling numbers, and then like how do you even inspect parts that small?
So the way we do it is usually when we start a product for the first time, we'll kind of develop we call them Kanban. Like I kind of made up our quality system based on the Toyota production system, and instead of having like a shop traveler, we have Kanban cards. So
Okay.
the Kanban cards are released when the customer orders, and then those Kanbans travel with the parts. And on that, we'll develop a kind of like a lot size for the Kanban, which generally represents like our inspection points. So a lot of them are like every 100 parts, or every 10 parts for the really tight tolerance, high complexity titanium parts we make. We'll set the machine counter for 100 or 10 or whatever that number is, and then we do a first and last on each lot. So I check the 100th piece, and then the 200th piece, and the 300th piece, and as long as everything checks out, we're just accepting all that as we go. We generally don't do sampling, like make a bunch of them and then sample them. We don't generally do that. Our customers are happy with verifying that you have conforming at the start and at the end of the lot.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what about how do you measure them? I mean, how do you measure stuff that's small?
We have it's called a RAM optical starlight system. So it's basically a video camera with a precision slide, and you can pick up part edges and use it sort of like a toolmaker's microscope, but then it has full inspection capability, so you can construct geometry on edges and pick up radiuses and circles and measure, between them and angles and all that kind of stuff. So that generally we use that for like first articles and setups where we're tuning everything in, and then I try to, as best I can. I can't always do it, but I try to get my critical dimensions that I can just measure them with a micrometer. Most of my parts aren't incredibly complex, and the usually the largest OD on a part is critical for whatever reason. It's a lathe part. Um, so a mic is sufficient just to double check in between throwing it on the optical system.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
I'd really like to get one of those fancy. Did you ever see those Mitutoyo ones that have the extra digit? They're like $1,200, but I'm saving up for one.
Yeah, I think Mari Tool uses them for.
Yeah, yeah, I really want one, but I'm like every time I go to get one, I'm like, probably shouldn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much very cool measuring equipment down in that range, like laser mics and.
Yeah, I bought a 1986 laser mic from a screw machine shop that was closing up near us, and it still works. You got to turn it on like the day before you want to use it. I think there's like a capacitor shot in it, but
That's cool.
It holds time, or it holds dimensions. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know I've seen a lot of vision systems start coming up too. Keyence and all those companies. It seems like that's becoming more and more popular as well.
Yeah, I had a demo on their system, and it's like, okay, I got to get that, but again, I got to get other stuff too. So that's on the list, though.
The balance for sure. I know at IMTS this last time, one of the stands that caught my eye was, I can't remember what Swiss company it was, but they had a Swiss feeding into a robot that would stick it in front of a Keyence sensor, and it would measure 8 or 9 dimensions, and then sort them depending on if they were good or bad, and comp the machine, and all that stuff. And it was impressive.
It is why I can't go to IMTS, because I'd be like, okay, I'm getting that, or I'm going to build it.
So, do these large quantities, is that kind of what made you step into automation and get your first UR? Or, how did you jump into that? And was it a leap, or was it just like the obvious choice where you were?
So kind of the story on kind of how we went from a one machine shop to kind of where we are today is, oddly enough, we were at my Swiss dealer. He was having an open house, and our customer called, and they basically tripled their monthly quantities for a 4-piece assembly we supplied to them. And they're like, can you do it? And we were standing in front of the machine that I bought as soon as I hung up. And we're like, yeah, we can do that. And then we hung up, and we're like, okay, we need this machine right here. And the dealer was more than happy to sell that to us on the spot.
I bet.
And so that was our first L12. And that has live back working. And that really simplified a lot of the problems I was having on 2 of the stainless parts in that assembly. And the other 2 titanium parts stayed on the A20. Both of those have secondary operations on the titanium parts. So the one gets a lot of engraving, which we could do on the Swiss, but it like quadruples the cycle time from like 2.5 minutes to 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So we're like, okay, that's not going to work. We bought, or we had a Haas mini mill, and I created some pallets and used an undercutting end mill to do all this engraving and flip the parts halfway through. So I could get 2.5 hours out of it, and then I'd have to flip all the parts and run it again. If you imagine, it's like if you had it in a 4th axis, it's engraving the whole way around the part.
Oh, wow.
And so I could do it from both sides. It was a little janky, and the little undercutting end mills were like $60 or something a piece, and they only made so many parts. And so I'd set a run up for like 2 hours, go home, eat dinner, come back, flip them. And we were kind of treading water. And then eventually we'd saved up enough money to get the 4th axis for the Haas. And so we could do them one at a time, but they were complete. I didn't have to flip them. But then every 5 minutes, I had to be at the machine, ready to put a new one in. And we just weren't able to get the number of parts out that we needed. So the UR, I forget how we got to them, but we were looking for robots because we knew that would solve the problem. And we stumbled upon that and looked at them and had a demo. And I think they had a video somewhere where they were like running up against an indicator and it was like repeating within a tenth. And I'm like, oh, okay, like this will work. I can get this to work because it repeats, like it'll be fine. And sure enough, we got the UR5 and married it up to the mini mill, and it could load that A-axis better than I could. Like the concentricity was perfect. Once you dialed it in, like you had to screw around with it a little bit as you were programming it, but once it was dialed, it just repeated perfectly. And that kind of broke down the fence between having a robot and not having a robot, and that's kind of like I think a challenge for a lot of people. Like, we're not the kind of shop that has a robot, and so we got that, and then shortly thereafter, all those parts, the 2 titanium parts, they get glass bead blasted, and we were like not able to keep up with all that glass beading, so we made up a little servo motor controlled slide that would go in and out of the cabinet and rotate the part to blast it, and that ran off like a little CNC program off a laptop. And then kind of the next logical step was to automate that. So a UR3 robot picks a part up, loads it into that little slide, and the slide does the blasting, and then it comes out and tells a robot to load another one. So kind of quickly, within a couple years, we had 2 robots running this work. And we continue to do that today, pretty much the same jobs. And we added another UR3. I forget how long after. And that was sort of just an experimental, like I call it my like test bed, where I have it just kind of sitting on a table and we do different things with it. And I bought a Cognex camera just because I wanted to see how that worked, and integrated it in so the robot can find parts and pick them up, which was fun. And I still kind of get a kick out of that.
Yeah, I personally, for my shop, would much rather buy a robot than try to hire, somebody just to push the button. That's always what I've kind of dreamed of.
And we were kind of going down that path where it was like, okay, like I knew this guy from high school, and he lived across the street, and we're like, oh, like he'll come over and help us out, and he was into it, and he's a good dude. And it was tough to give someone a job as boring as glass beading for like 8 or 10 hours at a time, and I wouldn't want to do that, so I didn't really, like, we all kind of were like, let's try to get this automated so we don't have to, bore anyone to tears by glass bead blasting for 8 hours at a time.
Totally, yeah. I think that was actually my first introduction to your Instagram. Was one of your videos on that, and I shouted around to all of our deburr people at my day job. Was like, look, we should be doing something like this. They're like, yeah, whatever, shut up, get away.
It's just like, I don't want to do it, and at that point, I'm not going to hire someone to do it because, like, I wouldn't ask someone to do something I don't want to do. At that point, you just got to automate it, and that's kind of our approach. And then at that point, we don't really need employees.
So, what's your mental threshold where you're like, oh, this is when I want to start adding a robot? Is it just when it feels like boring work, or is there like a cutoff where you're like, oh, this monetary value or this many parts probably could use a robot?
I would say, yeah. Like, first of all, it's like reliable repeat work, and you don't always know if what you're looking at is going to be reliable repeat work. And then like the second kind of checkbox we have is like, if we physically can't do it, like we don't have enough time. That really, like, it forces us to do it instead of just trying to like optimize or improve what we're doing. We're just like, we can't do it, so we don't have a choice. And that's kind of the best way, I think, the best way to be forced to do it, because I have so many things that I could implement a robot on. I just don't have time to do it. So I need to be kind of forced into it.
Gotcha. That's cool, really cool. So there were a few questions from Instagram. One of them I think you kind of touched on, but what are your thoughts on buying used machinery? And like, what's the spread on your shop? Like, is it 50% new, or where's it at? And that's from Fredder Than You on Instagram.
Sure. That's like a really interesting question because depending on the advice I give, someone might go buy a worn out machine and curse me, or But we bought. Okay, so let's see. Our A20 Citizen we bought new, which was our first kind of out the gate as a business. I had an old L16 Citizen that was made in like '86 in my garage when I was growing up. My dad got it from his his work, and I played with it and made a few parts for him on it, but it was just really limited. It didn't have any live tools or a sub spindle or anything, so it's not competitive to use for me now.
Right.
So that was a used machine, but I mean that ran fine. It needed new lube lines and stuff like that. Anyway, the A20 was new, which I really don't regret, seeing how like when you're starting, you really don't know what you don't know, and ruling out the machine being worn out is kind of key. Not to say then you're going to crash a brand new machine, which I've done repeatedly. And then we bought the Haas mini mill was used, which I still can't believe we got that for I don't know exactly what we paid for it, but it was like a really good deal. And it came with 2 Chick Vices and an extra probe body, which I understand why they included that.
That's crazy.
So I bet I could sell it for what we paid for it now, which I think is crazy. So I don't regret that one. The only thing with the used Haas was it came out of like Minnesota, and the HFOs were kind of screwy with like, hey, this machine isn't registered in the Philly HFO, so you got to talk to wherever you got it. I'm like, I don't know where I got it. It came from a machine dealer. So they weren't super helpful, but eventually we got it kind of figured out. But the machine wasn't worn out. It's in good shape, still runs good. And then we bought a used RO4, which was worn out when we got it. But the thing with those are most of the axes are linear motors, so you don't have ball screws and servos on it. And when you crash it, it just kind of bounces off the work or the tool or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, you like can't break this machine.
So what actually wears out then? I guess just the ways?
Yeah, I get like the linear rails would, but I mean, everything's been lubed. I use the term worn out as in like it was disgusting. It was like caked with like brass. Like it cut brass its whole life. And it was like caked and just really gross looking, but it runs good and holds 50 millionths basically once it's warmed up. So
jeez,
maybe that's not worn out, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand though, coming from your it seems like you keep your machines exceptionally clean. So
I try to. It's hard being in a small shop with so many oil slinging machines. Anyway, then we bought the used the new L12. That was the one we bought kind of on the spot, and I don't have any regrets on that. That came in and it needed to make parts the day it arrived. So that worked out well, having a new one. And then you get the new features, you get live tools and all sorts of stuff that an older machine may not have. And then we bought another used RO4, which was slightly less disgusting when we got it. But same thing, it holds tolerances. And then we bought a new L12 here almost a year ago, coming up on a year ago. And that thing, again, had to make parts the day it arrived, so it was good to have a new one.
Wow.
If you can tolerate, troubleshooting, which I think everyone's scared of, and I can be scared of it until I need to do it, and it's just like, all right, I got to figure this out. There's no reason someone mechanically minded that they want to be a machinist couldn't figure out what's wrong with the machine.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Peyton and I kind of span you where he has a brand new machine and I've got 2 used machines, so I think we can both talk to the better points of both of those strategies moving into a business.
Yeah, it's getting the options that you want. Sometimes you got to compromise if you're buying a used one, but like I said, just for whatever reason worked out for us that like that the Haas mini mill came with through the tool coolant, and it's like, really? For 2006, like I wasn't seeing those out there at the time.
Yeah, that's a pretty well optioned mini. That's
nice.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
So Dan, with your Swiss machines, buying used versus new, how does the value hold up on Swiss machines? Because I know I've looked on eBay and some of these machinery dealers, and they seem to hold their value pretty well.
I feel like they hold their value really well, but I haven't sold one yet, so I can't comment too much on that. I have a feeling the values will go down steeply when I go to sell one.
Yeah,
But
Only if they've seen your Instagram, right?
yeah, well, yeah, they'll be like, oh, he crashed that one a lot. I don't want that one. Yeah, I think they do hold pretty well now. Like it may be that you see just a 20 millimeter machine and I can look and notice the options on it and notice like, oh yeah, that one I wouldn't even buy that one because you can't make anything on it, or like drill and turn, that's about all you can do on it, versus like the new top of the line ones with B-axis and all that stuff. And I think as you see more and more features on the machines coming out, that the older ones are really going to start dropping off here soon, especially without live back working. It's going to be tough. It would be tough for me to buy anything like that now, just because. And I don't even do that complex of work. I just need to hit an edge with a chamfer tool to clean it up, so I don't have to deburr it later. Like that kind of stuff is critical versus just pumping parts out and then like hoping they don't have burrs all over them. It's like I got to make sure they don't have burrs on them.
that's a good point. And then we also have a question from Hammering. How do you balance investment with security while growing the business? And I know this, you could probably talk on this because Swiss machines are not cheap.
Yeah, so so far I haven't bought a machine without having work more or less lined up for it. At that point, it's kind of like a requirement of, the business needs this machine and I got to buy it and we got to make parts. Sometimes you kind of have an aspirational machine, like our little machines were kind of aspirational, but we bought them used, so it was less of a gamble. Like we wanted to intentionally drive the business towards micro parts, so we kind of made that investment, and the work kind of happened to come along with it as we had the machine time sitting there. Customer calls and needs something, and you have a machine that can make the part, the next day and ship it the day after that. Then you can grow your business pretty quick that way. My reading of that question would be, borrowing money to buy a machine versus paying cash, and that's kind of something we've been working towards, making sure we can just write a check when the machine is ordered, which is, I literally didn't think it was possible a year ago, and then last October we were able to do that for the new L12.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, like we're like getting ready. We're like, I don't want to call the bank and like do this. It's going to be awful, just a pain in the butt. And we were busy, and so we're just like, I wonder if we kind of do it. And like it was close. It was like not super fun, but it feels good that I come in the shop and that thing does not have a payment on it, and
that's fantastic. That's really cool. So I guess that question kind of leads into Morgan's question. When did you realize you could support a family on your CNC obsession, and how should smart people go about doing the same? So I guess like what made you go from graduating school with a degree where you could have gotten an engineering job somewhere and been comfortable, to wanting to be an entrepreneur with your dad and do that?
So I did have an engineering job, I think for like 2 years. I was a foundry engineer, so I worked on quality problems with sand castings, and that became less fun over time as they wanted me to be more of a supervisor and less of a engineer. So that was kind of my like, let's see if I can find something else to do that my job description isn't going to change kind of midstream on me. So yeah, I worked a full-time job for about 2 years. My wife was a CPA, so she was working as well. And then we bought the first machine, and I would work my shift at the job, and then I would drive down to my parents' house, which is where the machine was. And I'd work, 5-6 hours on it, setting it up or trying to make a part, programming it or whatever, or even making a few as we got closer to production. And I'd go home. And so I worked kind of 2 jobs there for a while, probably a year and a half maybe. And then finally we got a couple orders come through, and it's like, well, I don't, it's the same with the robot. Like I don't have enough time to do this. I got to quit my job. So did that. It was a little sketchy because my wife was pregnant with our son at that time.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I was like, she's got a job, so we should be good.
Oh my God.
So my selling point in that was my mom was gonna watch her son. So I was like, well, he'll come with me. I'll go to work, and it'll be fine. You go to your job, I'll go to mine. We'll make it work. And kind of it kind of worked out. It definitely was not supporting my family for the first couple of years because we were making payments on that first machine without any work for probably 9 months, almost a year, probably.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so like, kind of sucked. But I mean, you gotta start somewhere. So that's
Yeah,
kind of how it
definitely.
was.
So that kind of goes into another question. I think we just came up with this one, but family and work life balance. You seem to have a very good balance between working and then being with your kids. You see that on your Instagram a lot. How do you do that?
Sure. So like I said, my mom babysat our kids since they were born. Just like her calling is like raising kids, and like they're awesome, and I credit that to my mom most of the time. So well, to back up, our shop is at my parents' house, so um, their property is actually zoned industrial, kind of like a weird layout of our town, and so we had this corner piece of industrial ground that we always kind of thought, oh, we could build a shop here or do something here. Kind of worked into actually having a shop now, and so the kids come with me in the morning, and my mom watches them, and then I go in, kind of hang out with them, see how it's going. They come out and play, and I can usually sneak away for a couple minutes at a time. Used to be able to do that more. Now it's kind of crazy, but yeah. So that kind of the balance is I'm actually with them all day, at least within range of them all day. And then kind of at the end of the day, everyone's tired, and we go home around 5, and then I hang out with them at home, do dinner and stuff till about 8. They go to bed, and then entrepreneur, small business owner thing kicks in, and I got to do whatever I didn't get done till I go to bed. So usually I'm setting my microscope deburring parts or gauging parts or working quotes up or planning the schedule. So it may appear that it's an awesome balance, but it's a lot of
Yeah,
work.
yeah, for sure. And that's another question we both had for you is how many hours do you work, do you think?
So usually I get to work around 7, and I go home usually around 5. And I'm usually pretty much trucking all day. I'll eat lunch, kind of while I'm walking around tending machines, and then yeah, usually go home at 5, and then like I said, take care of whatever needs done in the evening after the kids are in bed. Then usually Saturday mornings, if I absolutely need to be at work, I'll go in like 7, 6:30 or 7, and then work till noon. Try to do less of that lately, but still have some jobs that I need to get done. So we'll go Saturday morning.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
But I guess kind of one thing kind of to add on that, like we were pretty diligent about not working on Sundays, just not killing ourselves to get everything done and just take a break and not be in the shop 7 days a week. Like when I was like 15 or 16, I did a couple like 14-day every day at work shifts at a fast food place. It's just like you like lose your sense of person, I think, and I just don't want to be at the shop that much. So I definitely don't work Sundays. Usually don't even have to be over there screwing around. So that's kind of a point of non-negotiable, I guess I'd
That's
say.
a good point. We kind of talked about that last episode, I think it was, about sometimes you just need to get out of, the shop and come back with a clear head. And I bet not going in for a full day, that can definitely be a nice reset coming back in on a Monday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's usually, yeah, it's not like I get to like, stay in bed all day. I got other stuff to do, but it's at least, yeah, you get machining out of your head for a day, which isn't a
Yeah,
bad
and
thing.
sometimes that can be hard to do.
So one question too that I think you even commented on saying that you liked it was I'm gonna butcher their name, but it was Pantechnicon Design.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Yeah, and it was what's one thing that in retrospect you wish you had done sooner? And I thought that was a fantastic question too. It's always interesting to hear what people wish they had done earlier.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we did a little bit of a an addition to our building. Prior to that, we had been in a 900 square foot, so 30 by 30 garage, basically 2-car garage. And I had, how many machines did I have in there? We had the A20, the R04, the Haas mini mill, I think the Robo Drill, and the L12. So we had like 5 machines in there.
Jeez.
And then we had my dad, our blast cabinet, and all my dad's, we have ultrasonic wash systems. We had like all that in there. And like there was rows, and like if he needed to get something on my side of the shop, I had to like move to one side so he could get. So like I wish we would have done that sooner, but then kind of it's like, well, you have to grow and you're uncomfortable while you're growing. So like we couldn't have just built on not really having the work to necessitate that. I don't think I really wish we did anything sooner, but it would have been nice to have that extra room. So it's kind of a, you really can't go back and change, but having more space would have been nice. It continues to be something that would be nice.
I was going to say, you guys are packed even with your new extension, it seems like.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. The sort of my industrial engineering background, it's like, well, what are our constraints? And I try to think about it like this, and it's, well, if I'm not going to have employees to run the equipment, I need to be able to walk to each piece of equipment in a reasonable amount of time. Well, other than like a really optimized layout, kind of just packing everything in is the most efficient way to do it. I don't have to walk that far to get to everything, even though it's kind of like a little bit of rows and aisles and stuff. And we joke, the place my dad retired from, they had their machines like as tight as the fattest guy that works there. So so we kind of use that as our design guide.
Yeah, I've had bosses say in the past, well, put them close enough that the biggest maintenance guy can get in there, or like
exactly.
whoever our machine tech is can still get in there. That's about it. So yeah, I totally understand that.
So you brought up your Robo Drill, and I wanted to ask you, did you buy that new or used?
Oh yeah, did I leave that? Yeah, that was. I don't know what you would call that. That was a demo machine from Methods.
Okay.
So it had 99 hours on it.
Oh wow.
So I'm not sure what that counts as.
It's pretty well optioned too, isn't it? I mean, you have a fourth and a probe, and
well, so we added the fourth when we bought it, and the tool setter, and it came with the 24,000 dual contact spindle and high pressure coolant, and so
that's a sweet little machine then.
Yeah, I do really like that. It's set up to run and run and run and run. So
do you run that machine? Because that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you moved those parts from your Haas to the Robo, the ones with the engraving.
Yep.
And so do you run that, like, let's say, do you load up one of those pallets before you leave the shop and it runs for however many hours?
So yeah, we were kind of getting a little concerned about hammering the mini mill with all this production. We needed a backup, so we got the Robo Drill in. And so I run 2 part numbers. The one runs out of a dual station chick vise, and the other one is on the 4th axis. And that's the engravings on the 4th axis. So I can load up like 10 hours worth of parts, and it'll just sit there and run them through. So usually I'll run during the day, it'll run the whole day, and then I'll leave usually between 60 and 90 parts for it to do at night. And then when I come in the morning, they're ready to go.
Okay. How long does one of the parts take to engrave?
They're about 5 minutes, I think.
Okay.
5 minutes and 20 seconds or something.
Okay, that's not that bad.
Yeah, it's like I just was never at the machine when it was ready for another part, and it's like, oh man.
Yeah, and then you just gotta think every 5 minutes you gotta go over there and stop what you're doing, and
yeah, and that's tough. Like until you need to be in the shop all day, you don't really think about, like, I used to take my son to school, like my wife takes him to school now, but I'd take him to school and pick him up from school, and it's like, okay, well, there's like 40 minutes that the machine was sitting without me.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, okay, now I'm not going to get enough parts done this month. So it's like that stuff kind of compounded to where it was just like, okay, the robot is key.
Definitely. Yeah, I laugh because I feel like every small shop owner thinks that way. You're like, oh, I got to go take lunch. I gotta go pick up lunch. That's 10 minutes the machine saves.
Yeah. It's sad but true.
So with so much technology in your shop, I mean, especially Swiss being such a specialized part of machining, where do you turn for info? Alberto Moss on Instagram asked that, and I thought that was a great question also because a lot of these things I would have no idea where to turn to.
You have your like a lot of the turning inserts and all the carbide tooling for a Swiss is very much specialized. Like I run NTK and they like just sell Swiss tools, so you can like kind of flip through their catalog and it will kind of fill your head with the tools you need to do a job. And then feeds and speeds, they're pretty good with supplying that info too. For me personally, I don't know, maybe other shops don't have this, but I feel like a lot of the lathe tooling out there kind of steers you in the wrong direction as far as generally accepted lathe work. You really got to kind of look at the guys that are marketing to Swiss shops for tools, for collets, for all that stuff. It really kind of is a thing of its own. Not to make it scary, it's not. It's just like usually my turning inserts have like a 2 thou radius or a 4, which is like a lot less than normal chucker lathe guys.
Right, yeah, it's not a 15 or a 30 or something
Exactly.
like
Yeah, like 8 is the biggest one I use in the shop, and then like you get down to like 0 radius tools and a lot of stuff like that, where it's just like kind of the parts require it, so you got to kind of track it down, and it kind of works itself out because it's kind of all in that same category. And then you have like your dealer will give you some application support, or just kind of colleague. Like, I mean, there's guys on Instagram that I'll DM and be like, what do you think about this? How would you program this? So I don't think it's not like you can go down to the library and get a book, but it's also the info's out there. You just got to be kind of. I try it myself first. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this part, so I'll just kind of set it up the way I think it should be set up, and then if it doesn't work, I try to work backwards and be like, is the part in the subspindle? No, it didn't get cut off. Why didn't it get cut off? Was the collet too loose? And then like you just kind of start working backwards. And my problem solving approach is looking at the results and trying to decide what caused it, and kind of doing a 5 why kind of analysis on everything.
Was there ever a part where you were just struggling immensely with, and then there was finally that aha moment?
There's a part that when we were very, very young, starting out with the business, it's a titanium part that is used during eye surgery. They make an incision, and this part kind of goes in the eye and holds the incision open.
that. Ooh.
And it's, if you can imagine, like a 26 thousandths diameter piece of titanium with a hole that's like 22 thousandths through it, so you have like a 2 thou wall. And not only that, but you need like this very perfect kind of cutting edge on the front of it that's like goes to like a 0 thickness basically. And we developed a way of doing it, and it actually, like, they did testing and stuff, and it was pretty good. It was competitive with what they were buying from Switzerland, and we got fairly good at it, but it was still always a pain in the butt. And like the parts were so tiny, like I'd lose them in the part shoot, or you'd put a pin in wrong and you'd bend the end of it or whatever. And so it was always a challenge, but it really kind of solidified my, like, just keep trying, try something else, do something else. Why did that happen? What can I do to fix this? And we really kind of improved that process and got it to be pretty good. Now the problem was they wanted like some ungodly amount of them, and I was just like, I can't do it. I can't make that many. But it was fun to have that challenge early on. Kind of opened my eyes to what is possible.
Yeah. I guess another thing that you brought up is part handling must be big for you, especially with such small and thin parts, bending them or just even collecting them all.
Yeah, so that I say to people, like, getting the part out of the machine is like the hardest part of the job. Like machining it, fine, whatever, like that's the easy part. It's like, what do you do with it? Sometimes I have a part that's I got a part coming up that's made out of tubing. It's 73 thousandths diameter and it's 5 inches long.
Wow.
And yeah, it's like, well, okay, like what do I do with it? And so like that one gets pushed through the subspindle into a tray, Then I have a part that's 17 thousandths diameter and it's 110 thousandths long. And those we just blow them out of the subspin into a little tub. But like, yeah, most of my time is getting the part out of the machine because it needs to be out of the machine so it can go in and grab the next one. And I don't have a lot of way of like detecting whether it actually left the collet or not. So sometimes they'll pack up in there, get jammed in between the separations in the collet, and so like that's most of my time is like cleaning collets out and fixing problems. But that kind of gets back to like managing tool life, so you don't have chips wrapping on them, or there's a lot of like things that go into getting the parts to eject easily.
So what do you use to deburr parts like that? Because you were saying that at night you deburr under a microscope, but I mean I imagine you're using tweezers and like I mean a deburr knife isn't going to work on something that small. What do you use?
Yeah, so a lot of the deburr I'm doing is like it's not a lot of part numbers. It's just a few part numbers that have features. Like the one is like it's got two angle holes that intersect, and we got to make sure there's no burr inside. So I take like a 60 thousandths boring bar, and I go in and just kind of rub it along the edges to remove any burr that's in there. I would love to do that in the machine. I haven't been able to get a toolpath that does as good of a job as I can do with a boring bar. And then we have a lot of the little stuff like it's got to work. I can't deburr stuff that you pick up with the tweezers. Generally, that stuff does do pretty good, and I can get away with it. It's just like a lot of the internal geometry. If that isn't something you can get to with a chamfer tool or something, then you need to deburr that end of the scope. So we don't do much of that, but it's something where my concentration needs to be high. So I do it at home when I'm not running machines.
Yeah, it seems like your customers are pretty picky. I saw that post you made of somebody checking the flatness on that tiny part.
That was crazy. They spec'd out I think it was like a 20 thousandths diameter on the face of a part, and they wanted the flatness to be within 2/10. And I was like, okay, like sure, whatever, we can do that. Just face it, fine. And then they like sent me this like laser scan thing, and it was like in microns, and it was like a heat map of like the flatness of the part. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're actually like inspecting that.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell from the picture at first. I was like, I don't know if that part's in spec or not.
It was I think it was like just out or just in or something, and they wanted to improve it. So I like lapped it a little bit on a piece of or with a tool and just kind of smoothed it down a little bit. And they're like, oh yeah, they're good now. I'm like, oh, okay, good. Like I can't check that.
Wow.
So how do you program your Swiss? Because I know a lot of people talk about that side of things. I think you do some hand, but I think you also use software.
I do. Let's see here. I do everything by hand with the exception of sometimes I'll have a little bit of live tool code that needs to be like not even a surfacing, but like we have a mode called G12.1 where it's using the C-axis and the X-axis to interpolate like a mill. So I will sometimes use Fusion to give me that milling toolpath, and then I just go into TextEdit and kind of drop it into my program. I am kind of very picky about toolpaths and stuff, so I do like to be efficient in terms of I'll program how I want the tool to leave the cut and all that sort of stuff. That being said, it's generally like 2D profiles where you're just programming the profile of the part, and it's like a couple radiuses and a couple G1s and you're done. So it sounds complicated, but it's once you break the parts down into kind of sketches and profiles, it's not difficult at all. Oh yeah, with a Swiss you don't have roughing, so like usually you just turn it once and it's done. So you're not really worrying about like finish pass and a roughing pass. So it kind of makes life easy.
So you don't really use can cycles or anything like that. You're just
for drilling like a G83, we'll use that. Sometimes I'll write a macro to do if I really want a really specific drilling path. Dwells at the bottom, dwells at the top, feeds down, and I'll write a little quick macro to do that. That's the other thing. Like I use a lot of macros, loops, and that engraving, it follows kind of a contour of the part on that titanium part in the fourth axis. And I wrote that all with macros, so it generated the code in the control as it machined it, which I thought was
Wow.
pretty cool because I didn't have any CAM software and they needed these parts, and I was like, I don't want to admit I don't have CAM software, so I'll just have to like use math or whatever. So I turned it into like a step function, the part profile into a step function, and then a bunch of kind of conditionals. And I probably spent like 2 weeks figuring it out, but eventually it worked.
That's impressive, though. So you use Fusion for your mills, though, for the robo and.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I did program the mini mill by hand quite a few times, kind of before I realized Fusion was a thing. The other thing is I use Macs, so like Fusion being on Mac was like the obvious choice. Whereas like I didn't want to have to buy a PC just to run like some SolidWorks and then some CAM. Like I just don't want to do that. So
Yeah, that's fair. Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. Like not to be like down on CAM, but like I just don't really enjoy sitting on my computer and then like it shows the toolpath and it's like that's not what I wanted. Like I don't even know what to do. So like then I get frustrated and it's like I'd rather just program it myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely.
Do you like Fusion though, from what you've used it for?
I do. Yeah, I do. Like I enjoy modeling in it and everything, and the cam's fine. Like I just am not like I have no desire to like open a milling job shop where I have to program like 2 parts a day. Like I would just not do that. So
Yeah, that
sorry
makes sense,
sorry if
though.
that offends.
No.
No, to each his own. That's what's so great about machining is everybody can find their niche.
Yeah, I mean I can't explain it. Like I like computers, I like programming, I like CNCs. I just don't like CAM software.
Yeah, that's fair though. So we have another question from Adam the Machinist, and he asked, "What will machines be like in 20 to 30 years?" Which I think is a really interesting question.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any inside track on it. Yeah, I don't know. Like they're cramped. Like speaking of Swiss machines, like they're putting more axes and everything and more simultaneous control paths. But I don't know. I guess it would say like what are parts going to be like in 20 to 30 years, and then like try to back into what a machine would need to be to make that part. I think you'll still have a lot of what we have now. Probably they'll figure out some way to do like additive.
I mean, you can only add so many things to, let's say, a Swiss, for example, right?
Yeah,
And I mean, that's all you need at some point.
I feel that way. Like I think we're good.
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
also have experience with the
No, I
Swiss
mean,
because they have linear motors, which we're just kind of starting to see to come into mills, and it seems like there's a lot of technology that's stuffed into those Swiss machines that has only just started making its way into larger machine tools.
yeah. My RO4, which kind of like the machine close to my heart, and we have a new one on order, which I'm like super excited. Like I'm counting the days till it gets here. But the two I have are almost 20 years old, and they have five linear motors in them. So it's like not super new technology. It's just I understand the like machining forces involved when you use those need to be fairly low, which makes sense. The application of a 4 millimeter Swiss machine, like you're not really taking heavy cuts. So I welcome that, but I don't expect linear motors to move up in machine sizes at this time. I think they're really going to be focused on integrating B-axis into every machine. Doing more with the sub spindle in every machine, more live tools, which hey, that stuff is great. Yeah, I think maybe even some of the like the new LFE technology, which is like the chip breaking. I think you'll see that really move to every lathe that's made. Maybe see that more as standard instead of being options as it is now.
How many of your machines have that?
We just have that on the new L12, so just one, which kind of like I want to run that on that machine. It's like, well, I can't put everything on that machine, so that's frustrating. But eventually, we'll upgrade.
Yeah, of course. So you said you've got a new RO4 coming. Anything else on the horizon for Rudolph machine or?
No, I saw that machine on like I look on the Citizen Japan website because like I don't know, I just am like a nerd that way. I'm like I wonder what this guys are up to, and then I email my dealer. Yeah, I know he gets mad at me because it's like, hey, what's up with this one? It's on the Japan website. Why don't you have it? And he's like, I'll check. So yeah, we ordered that, and we like I said, our other machines are 20 years old, and we got them used, and like I don't know, like they may be fine, like they may run another 20 years, but like we got to kind of start uh, bringing some newer stuff in for that size work. So that was kind of the impetus to buy that. I wouldn't. I've always been tinkering with the idea of an EDM, a wire. It'd be fun to have, but that's a chicken egg problem where you're like, I don't have any work right now, so I'm not gonna buy one, but I also can't buy one if I don't have any work. So
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But that'd be fun to have laying around. But I hear like if you're not going to use it, having one just in your shop off is probably not a great idea either. So
yeah, they take a lot of upkeep for sure.
Yeah, and you need to run them.
So is this new machine? Is this going to replace one of the old ones, or are you adding it? I didn't think you had any room for another machine.
Yeah, I don't have any room, but I'm thinking of taking one of the old ones out and putting the new one in, and putting the old one kind of in that middle space we have just built this last winter.
Okay.
Just temporarily, but then like I'll just run it over there, and it won't be temporary. So that's kind of my thought.
Awesome. Well, I mean, it sounds like a plan at least,
Yeah, I mean, we have room. It's like, do we really need to fill every corner with a CNC machine? Well, yeah, for now, I guess we do.
Some people would say
Yeah.
yes. So do you see yourself, I know you had mentioned a little bit that you've kind of hit this ceiling where you're very comfortable and you don't want to expand too much more?
Yeah, like it's tough because like what's the point? I don't want to hire anyone. Mainly, like I really don't feel comfortable having someone kind of dependent on me outside of my family. So I don't want to create a big employee workforce. So that does limit us to what we can do. And my dad's kind of getting up there towards retirement time. He enjoys what he does, so he's not like he doesn't have a date that he's going to be done, but I just want to kind of take stuff off his plate. So with everything kind of getting towards being paid for, we're not going to push to double every year for the next 10 years. We're just going to kind of see what comes in, kind of be picky about new work, and pick the right ones as best we can.
That sounds like a great
Yeah,
plan.
for sure. I mean, if it makes you happy, what's the point otherwise, right?
Yeah. The stress drivers are like, I need this in a week, or I need this tomorrow. It's like, oh, come on, guys. Like, I'm out of the like startup phase of like bending. I will bend over backwards for a customer, but I don't like being forced to do it, week in, week out. It kind of takes the fun out of it. Like I enjoy coming in, having, a couple weeks heads up on what I got to make, and kind of planning. And the stress comes from shipments and people not really giving me the time that they should. And, I understand once in a while, stuff gets messed up and you need things quick, but getting away from being in a panic to ship stuff is kind of my dream state.
How do you package things? That brings up a decent point with things being so small.
Yeah, so a lot of being mostly medical, a lot of our customers will kind of specify how they want things packed. Generally, we do a double bag, double Ziploc bag, basically, that allows them to take out the parts from the outer bag inside a clean room, and then they can use the parts in the second bag without getting any debris or anything every in the clean room. So yeah, just double bagged and then put them in a box. The bulk of our work I actually just deliver to our customers. We have our two biggest customers are local to us, so I'll just throw them in the car and drive over.
Oh, awesome.
Which eliminates like UPS backing over one of our boxes or something, which generally we like ship a month's worth of product at a time. So I would like really be distraught if something happened to anything.
Jeez, yeah.
And then for smaller customers, we'll just double bag them and put them in, some foam packaging and put them in a cardboard box. And generally, a lot of our UPS boxes are 4-inch cubes or 5-inch cubes. So they're not, and they're light, so they're not really apt to be damaged easily.
Gotcha. And I guess your parts are light enough that there's no risk of them rubbing up against each other and causing any damage.
Yeah, generally that's not too big of a worry. If it's like a larger part with like critical finishes or anything, then we'll put them in like a 1 inch square bag or something like that, each individually. We actually do a lot of our work for our local customer. Like they just want it's got that glass bead finish, so any time they touch each other, they're going to leave a mark. So we just bag them each individually.
Gotcha. So I saw you put a couple questions on here for Peyton and I too.
Yeah. One question I had was, Peyton, how you kind of got into molding itself. Like, I understand, like, you were into the Lego side of the business, but what made you buy an injection molder and, like, decide you can do that?
That is a great question, and I continue to ask that to myself. I mean, you ask a 13-year-old kid, like, why'd you buy an injection molding machine? My answer would probably be like, well, I wanted to make cool stuff. Um, and really, it was to bring a product to market to an extent. I had a product in mind that would go with Lego minifigures and kind of the whole Lego lineup. And at the time, Lego hadn't produced it. They since then have been making it. Okay. So I kind of beat them by about a year, which was really awesome because that really, within that year, I learned a lot about injection molding myself, and then kind of the process of getting a actual production mold made and then sent to, a full-blown injection molding shop and getting, 20,000 parts made, and then within that year selling all of them, which was a really good learning experience. And I'm really grateful that I was able to do that at such a young age because, I still talk to those guys that ran the parts and they still help me out. But I guess to answer your question, it was really just to play around. And I honestly, it was probably the best idea or best thing I've ever done as far as buying a piece of technology and just literally learning as much as you could. I took more interest into that than I did at school at the time. So
yeah, kind of coming from like I said, the foundry background. So I was in, we have gates and runners and molds and all that sort of thing. When you make a mold, do you ever like, how do you know how big to make the runners and how does all that work?
That's a great question. There's still some science to that I'm not sure on because, there's certain softwares that you can run mold simulations and see the plastic flow, which I really want to get into. I know Autodesk makes a couple of them, but they're just expensive and I've gotten this far without them. So, but really it's just kind of trial and error. There's a couple rules of thumb, as far as what not to do and what to do and why you do this. Same with machining and whatnot. But, really just trial and error to this point, honestly.
Do you ever make a mold and it's just like a dud, like it doesn't work at all?
Yeah, I've made that. And normally what's nice is you can start to find patterns, but it's so dependent on the part. And since parts are so different, as you know, it's kind of hard to tackle that problem each time sometimes, or it can be. Sure. At least.
That's cool. Yeah. I get like, I see a lot of medical parts and like someone's molding them. So like there's a huge market out there for molding. And I think that's probably neglected by a lot of guys like us where we're into just machining or whatever. And you can do machining and create this kind of this secondary part from it.
Yeah. People forget about, all these plastic parts that you see around your house. I could name 200 of them that are on my desk right here. But all of that had to go through a machining process at one point or another.
Yeah, I say that to my wife. Like she's like holding up a toy or something, and she's like, things are so expensive for what it is, and I'm like, you don't understand. Someone had to make a mold for that.
Yeah. Do you say it in that voice?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, I know that crazy look that you get. Just like you don't get what's going on here. I get like so excited when I see machining lines or surface finishes in molded parts. I'm like, see, I told you it was a machine.
Yeah, I'm that way. Like I'll look up like plumbing fixtures. I'll be like, oh, here's where they parted it. Here's the core. Here's this. Here's that. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? I'm like,
all right. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, unless you're Apple and you're geniuses. I don't know if you guys use AirPods, but if you've seen the AirPods cases, that is just amazingly injection molded.
Yeah, I haven't taken a look at that, but like, yeah, like zero draft on any of their stuff, and yeah, they're crazy.
Yeah, they're really something else.
So one other question I have for you guys was, you both seem like mill guys. Do you think there's something that makes a difference between a mill guy and a lathe guy, or are you born that way?
Yeah,
Were
we're
you
born
born
broken.
that?
Sorry. No, really,
Sorry.
the only reason that I'm such a mill guy is that's all I've had experience with. The first shop I worked in had 11 or 12 mills and one CNC lathe, and there was one guy who ran it. And really, all of my time, anything that they would pay me for, was on the mills, and so that's where I got stuck. And my most recent job, I've actually been forced onto the lathe a couple times. My first job there was an absolutely massive ring of 17.4 on one of our lathes, and so it was kind of a trial by fire, and I really enjoyed it. I want to play more with a lathe, and I really love a lathe with live tooling for my shop, just because it'll open up so much more work for us to take on.
Yeah, I'm definitely a lathe guy, but I'm kind of afraid of chucks, so I'm like a collet lathe guy. It's like a junior lathe
Yeah,
guy.
they can get pretty frightening. I mean, all of that metal spinning around, and I've seen too many YouTube videos of parts flying off, and
Yeah, gives me the willies. Yeah, I'm a lathe guy to the extent of like using a fourth axis in my mill to make square parts because I can't think of like how I would hold it in a vise. So I'm like, I'll just do it on the fourth.
That's a good way to do it, actually. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like cheating, but it's closer to the way
it
my
works.
mind works.
I would say the same as Dylan. I just started with them, and that kind of goes back to the molding. I mean, you can't make injection molds on a lathe unless you get crazy with it. But I honestly really want to get into Swiss. I want to find an excuse to. That's why I worked at a Swiss shop for a while. Then the second job, they had me running and programming some DMG Moris, like an NLX, and
Okay.
then an older NLX equivalent Morisiki. Uh, those machines, and then I've also worked on a Doosan Lynx with sub spindle, and basically at my school they got a Doosan Lynx brand new, and the instructor basically was like, "All right, Peyton, that's your project. I'm not giving you any work or assignments. Like, go figure that machine out." And I'm just like, okay." And he's just like, "I want you to make this part. I want you to transfer it to the sub. I want you to do all this stuff." Like, I had no experience, and I'm just like, okay. And that was really fun to do all that learning. And I'd love to get a lathe, but like you said, you need to get some work for it first.
Yeah, yeah, it's I understand your predicament there.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at.
So last thing I kind of had to ask you guys was, what do you guys do while your machines are running? I personally like probably 9 hours out of a 10-hour day, I'm listening to podcasts or watching stuff on YouTube. What do you guys do?
I know Dylan's good at sleeping.
I've only slept like one or two times, but it was nice. For the most part, I'm similar to you. Like I listen to podcasts at my day job, and then at my shop, it's music or YouTube. Though I try to do as much cleaning as I can. Picking up trash and organizing parts, deburring any stock that I have. I try to stay busy on machining stuff, but sometimes having that little disconnect while I'm just running something boring is a nice distraction.
For sure.
Yeah. I would say podcasts, music. Problem is, I'm the type of person that I can only listen to things for so long, and then I just want like peace and quiet. You can only listen to music for so long, in my opinion. Cleaning, YouTube's always nice. And then if you can, programming whatever next job you have, or quoting, or whatever, emails, whatever little tasks you can come up with.
Yeah, it's tough. At least for me, like once I get like 5, 6 machines running, it's hard to really focus on like programming, like really, especially programming or inspection, to like doing a first article or something where you're really scouring the print and looking at it and focusing. So I tend to save that for when I don't have a bunch of machines running, and then emails and stuff, kind of, and quoting you can kind of do in the background. But for whatever reason, you know, super focused on programming is something I got to do kind of without distraction.
That makes sense. So do you just do it on a notepad program or something like that on your computer and then transfer it over?
Yeah, I have a PC at the shop that runs an old version of Solid Edge 2D, which is like my favorite. It's sort of like AutoCAD LT back in the day. It's just 2D, and like I can either import a DXF and like have the outline of the part, or I just sketch it from the print, pull points off that, and sometimes I'll draw my tools in just to like get centerline dimensions and stuff to program from. But yeah, everything is programmed from a 2D sketch that I make on the Solid Edge.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, like it's like a basically every part number has a 2D model file that I use. Probably look like a crazy person because I'll sketch like offset lines, so I don't have to program with G41, radius comp. I'll just do a bunch of crazy stuff, and I don't expect anyone else to be able to understand it, but I enjoy it. Yeah, weirdly enough, I do enjoy like that kind of CAD programming stuff.
Okay, yeah, I mean, hand coding and things like that, drawing up and finding points. There's definitely a flow to it. It's really nice.
Yeah, I definitely do like, not to be one of those like guys, but like you definitely can get into like a flow state of like you're in that, and I don't really make mistakes when I'm in that. Like it's just I go slow, but it's very meaningful and very precise, and I just can knock a program out pretty quick. And then like I say that, and then I'll go over to the machine. Like I was programming a job yesterday afternoon, and like I made the first part and it looked nothing. Like the radiuses were all weird. I'm like, oh okay. Like I inverted a number and like mixed up something else, and so 2 fixes. Second part was good and carried on.
Jeez. Well, I guess
Whatever works.
yeah. One I guess final question that I had was what made you come on Instagram in the first place? I mean, that's how we found you, and I feel like that's how a lot of people have been kind of introduced to Swiss lathes in general. What spurred social media?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. I forget why I even made an account, but I was like posting pictures of my kids and stuff, and then like I must have been on like the explore page or whatever, and was like just looking for different things, and I saw I don't really have a clear memory of it, but I started tagging stuff, and that kind of seemed to be the driver, and I just showed some stuff from work because I didn't really have anything else to post, and it just kind of picked up. I have to scroll back and look. But it really kind of took off when I started doing like some of those like fingertip parts. Those really seemed to kind of get some traction, and a lot of people would follow or like them.
Yeah, the chipper part.
Yeah, chipper part. That was a good series. It's fun. Like I wish I could show more. Not to be like the I can't show you what I'm working on guy, but I gotta kind of tread lightly. But it would be fun to really kind of show everything, but kind of gotta pick and choose a little bit.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners know exactly that feeling of. It seems like for the most part, machinists just love to share everything, and the fact that we can't do the NDAs and being cognizant of our customers' requirements, it gets frustrating. But when you can share that really cool part, or that cool method or something, it's really rewarding.
Yeah, usually I'll like put my thumb over half the part and be like, here's the cool part of this part, and I feel like that's like less of a risk than just posting it and explaining exactly what it does and who the customer is.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of times I don't even know what half the stuff I make does, and then like I'll be like, hey, what is that? And then like I had an engineer over today, and he was explaining it, and I'm like, oh, okay, like that's weird, but okay.
Yeah, I've got family members all the time. I'll show them pictures of a part, and they're, oh, what does that do? I was like, I don't know. It's called housing, or it's called cap. Like that's as far as I know about it.
Yeah, I had a part called a cavity creator, and I'm like, and I knew it was like some sort of like spinal tool. I'm like, ugh, I don't need to know any more about that.
Oh man.
Well, at least you're helping people down the line, especially that eye surgery part. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is kind of like, oh, we're making money or whatever, but like ultimately we're the best option for the customer, and that's kind of helping the customer get stuff out there to help people. So it's kind of a direct link, and it kind of makes you feel good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, should we wrap it up there?
Yeah, I think we've taken up enough of Dan's time. We really appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and was a little worried, but I think it went well.
Yeah, thank you once again for coming on. And guys, we'll be posting about this on Instagram, and this should be edited and uploaded on the 21st when you're seeing this. So definitely make sure you guys check out his page, Danny Rudolph. A lot of cool stuff on that page. Make sure you go follow him, and make sure you guys follow us on the Within Tolerance Podcast Instagram page. And once again, it is available pretty much everywhere: Spotify, Apple, I don't know any other ones, but they're probably on there. So definitely go give us a rating, and we will see you guys next week with another episode.